Hey guys, Ian here, and in this video we're going to be taking a journey through Laravel Forge. So what is Laravel Forge? Well, put simply, it's a tool to manage and deploy web applications over top of a platform like AWS or DigitalOcean. It does not replace your hosting provider like AWS or DigitalOcean, but it works on top of it to automate and streamline your deployment process. So some of the things that we're going to be covering today, we're going to be working with GitHub, AWS, and Laravel Forge. I'll be creating accounts on each platform along the way so that you can see the process from start to finish. And finally, before jumping into project specifics, we should point out that there are costs associated with what we're doing today. First and foremost, Forge is not a free product. While it does offer a 5-day free trial, after that it's $12 a month for their base hobby plan. And there's also the cost for your hosting provider. Today we'll be using AWS and we'll fall under the free tier plan. And finally, in this tutorial, I'm going to be using a domain name, so that is an optional cost to consider as well, which can be about $10 to $20 a month for a pretty normal domain name. For today, we're going to be working on building and deploying a website for a fictitious company called Billy's Burritos. We're going to get their website built, pushed up to the server, and live for the world to see. We're going to be working a lot with AWS, Forge, and GitHub, and we're going to be doing that inside of a web browser. Outside of that, we also will be using a terminal to execute a few commands. We will not be jumping into any code today. All right, so with that all said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is create an empty project named Billy's Burritos. I'm going to be using the Laravel global installer to do this. If you'd prefer to use the GitHub repository or the composer command, that is absolutely fine as well. If you'd like more information on how to use the Laravel global installer, or you need instructions on how to get that set up, you can check out my other video that I have linked for you up on the screen. I'm also going to be including the option for the authentication scaffolding, and that's just going to make sure that it installs a basic view, model, and route for my login and register screens. I included a link in the video description to the Laravel documentation page that explains the scaffolding in much more detail. Now, I'm only using the authentication scaffolding because I want to be able to test my application's interaction with the Laravel Forge database, and having this set up right off the bat is just going to be a quick and easy way for me to do that. If you'd prefer not to use the scaffolding, by all means, it's not required. You're just not going to be able to verify that connection. So I'm going to be working on my desktop. So in my terminal, I'm going to change my path there. Then I'm going to issue the Laravel new command to build my Billy's Burritos project. My favorite thing about this global installer is that it not only sets up your basic directories, but it also installs your composer dependencies for you right out of the gate. And so that's really all we need to do. I have the project set up, it has the authentication scaffolding, and now we're ready to go ahead and get this pushed up to GitHub. So the first thing I'll do is just create a GitHub account, and make sure you do this with a real email address because you will have to click a verification link in your inbox. And of course, you'll probably get this puzzle that you have to solve to prove that you are a human. So once we get past that, we can scroll to the bottom here and click the skip button. And now I just need to hop back into my email inbox and click that verification link that I mentioned earlier. All right, and just like that, we are in GitHub with our brand new account. So I'll just click the skip button at the bottom here and we are ready to get started. So the only thing we need to do in GitHub is just create a repository and get our code pushed up to it. So I'll click the new repository button and we'll name our repository Billy's Burritos. And I'm going to make it private. And so now we're ready to take our project and get it pushed up into this new repository. Now GitHub has all these convenient commands listed on the left here that show you how to get your project pushed up, and we can use most of these, but since we have an existing project with existing files and directories, we just have to alter these commands just a little bit to our needs. So we'll go ahead and get our terminal path into the project. So I'll just change my directory into Billy's Burritos. And then from here, we can start using the git commands. So I'll use git init as the first command, and this is going to set up our directory as a GitHub repository. And the next thing we'll do is get all of our files added. And so I'll use git add and then a period, and that's going to take all our files and add it into version control. And then we'll use the git commit command to actually take those files and put them into a commit. So the next thing we need to do is get the repository's remote origin added. So I'll just copy and paste this command directly into the terminal. And then the last thing we need to do is actually push this code up into the repository. Before we can actually push all this code up to GitHub, we do need to authenticate through the terminal. So we just need to supply our GitHub email and our GitHub password to do this successfully. Now, if you want to bypass this in the future, you can look into setting up an SSH key with your GitHub account, and you won't be prompted to authenticate every single time you have a change. And so it looks like the command was successful. Let's go ahead and refresh our page on the left, and there we go. We can confirm that this was pushed up successfully. So let's go ahead and jump into AWS. We're done in GitHub for now. As we mentioned, we will be using AWS as the hosting provider. So if you're using something else like DigitalOcean, you'll want to follow the specific instructions for that platform. So we'll go ahead and create our account, and everything we're going to be doing in this tutorial is going to fall under the AWS's free tier plan, which will give us free access to selected resources. Although you won't be charged, you still will have to enter your credit card, so keep that handy. All right, so the next few screens are going to ask you for some personal and billing information, so I'll go ahead and fill those in off camera. And then finally, once that's done, we'll be prompted to verify our mobile number. So I'll enter my mobile number, and then you just have to enter a 4-digit verification code that you receive via text message. Okay, so next we're ready to pick a plan, so we'll go ahead and select that base free plan. And now we're actually ready to go ahead and sign in. I'll use the same information we provided during signup. And we are in. So really the only thing we need to do with our AWS account is get an access ID and a secret key. We'll plug those two pieces of information into Laravel Forge, and that's what's going to give Forge permission to interact with our AWS account. So for today's video, we're going to be creating an IAM user specifically for Laravel Forge. You might be wondering why we can't use the root account that we just created, and the answer is for security. We never want to give anybody access to our root account since it has unlimited access to everything in our AWS account. Billing, infrastructure, you name it. So instead, we'll just create a new user and assign it only the permissions it needs. I put a link in the video description to more information about why this is a good practice. So from the top, I'll just select my account name, and then I'll select my security credentials. And then on the left, we can select users, and then add user. For the username, I'm just going to put Forge. You can make this whatever. And then I'll select programmatic access type and click next. The next page is going to let you create a group, and the group is what's going to allow us to assign specific permissions to this AWS user. So for the group name, it can be anything you want. And then in the bottom half of the window is where we can actually pick the permissions that we want to assign this user. Laravel Forge only needs permission to create EC2 instances, subnets, and VPCs, and it also needs permission to add SSH keys. Thankfully, all of these are wrapped up into just two policies that we need to assign. The first policy is called Amazon EC2 Full Access. And then the second permission is called Amazon VPC Full Access. And then we can select Create Group. And then we can go ahead and click Next through the next two screens. And then we'll create the user. Now the confirmation page is going to give us the opportunity to download the secret key and the access ID, which is great because that's exactly what we need. But it is important to download and save this information now, as once you leave this page, you're never going to be able to see the value of the secret key again. So I'll just click Download CSV, and then we can go ahead and open up that file. and I can see inside the file contains my access ID and my secret access key. These two pieces of information are very sensitive and should be stored and shared with care. So we're done with GitHub, we're done with AWS, and we're finally ready to jump into Laravel Forge and get our website deployed live. So let's hop right into Laravel Forge and create an account. The first thing we're going to do is connect our Laravel Forge account with our GitHub account. And since I'm already signed in another tab, all I need to do is click this authorize button. However, you may be prompted to enter your GitHub username and password. The next thing we'll do is connect our AWS account. So at the bottom, I'll select AWS, and you'll see I'm prompted to enter my secret key and my access ID. So we'll go ahead and pull those out of the CSV file. So the next thing we'll do inside Forge is actually subscribe to a billing plan. Forge does offer a 5-day free trial. However, after that, it is $12 a month for their base hobby plan. So I'll go ahead and enter in my payment information, and I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. Once the payment information is entered, we can click subscribe under the hobby plan. And then we'll finally be redirected to a page where we can start setting up our server. So I want to create my server on AWS, so I'll go ahead and click that, and then I'll be prompted to enter some information about the server. For the name, I'm just going to leave it with the randomly generated default name. Region's fine as Virginia. And for server size, I definitely want to keep this as it is, so it stays within the free tier on AWS. For VPC, I'm going to leave it set to create a new one, and I'm going to input the name of my server. And for the rest of the options, we're just going to leave them set to their defaults. Once our server begins provisioning, you're going to be prompted with the server sudo password and the root database password. Copy and paste these passwords and save them in a safe place. We're not going to be using them in this video, but you're not going to be able to see them again once you leave this page. So at the bottom, we can see our new server, Scenic Storm, is provisioning. Server provisioning can take a while. I've seen it take up to 10 minutes sometimes. So we'll go ahead and pause the video and come back when it finishes. All right, so once the server is finished provisioning, you'll see a screen that looks like mine. If you aren't seeing the screen, just click Servers from the top main menu and then click the name of the server we just created. First things first, we're going to go ahead and create a site, and the site is going to be what's linked to our GitHub repository. I'm going to be using a domain name for this tutorial, so that's what I'm going to enter as the root domain. However, if you're not using a domain name right away, you can put whatever you want in this field. The only other setting that I need to enable is create database, and we're just going to give it the name Billy's Burritos. Once added, our site will populate into the list of active sites at the bottom with a loading icon right next to the name. Once the loading icon disappears, we can select it from the list and actually connect up our GitHub repository to this Forge site. For the repository field, I'll enter my username / the name of my repository, and then I'll leave the branch set to master. And then I'll select Install Repository. And this is where the magic happens. Forge is going to go up to my GitHub account, pull down my code, install my Composer dependencies, and have that all set up on an Amazon EC2 server. Once the repository was installed successfully, you'll be redirected right into the new site. At the top, we'll have some deployment information and then some other options below. The only panel we're going to be focusing on for this video is the top one labeled Deployment. Anytime you make a change to your GitHub repository, this is where you're going to come to update the code that's on your Forge site. Now, you can come to this page and click Deploy Now each time you make a change, or you can enable this cool feature called Quick Deploy, which will monitor your repository and automatically deploy it to Forge anytime a change is detected. It is a very cool feature, and I highly recommend turning this on. While we're here, we're also going to go ahead and connect up our database. So on the left, I will select Environment and then select Edit Environment. This is where your env file comes into play and where you can make changes to these values. For the database, all I need to do is change the name, and I'm going to point that to the same name that I created during setup. All right, so the next thing I need to do is set up my domain name to point to our new server. If you aren't going to be using a domain name, you can sit back and relax and skip these next few steps. So my domain name is hosted on GoDaddy, so before we head over there, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the IP address of our server, which is listed in the top information section. Once I'm in GoDaddy, I'm going to pop this IP address into my main A record for the domain name. If you're using a subdomain, you're going to want to apply this to that record instead of the main A record. Now, changing DNS records can take up to 48 hours or maybe even 72 hours before your changes are actually in effect. However, usually it can be pretty quick. So let's go ahead and test this out. We'll pop open a new tab and we'll go to billysburritos.com to see what happens. And here we are. This is our new Laravel application. And in the top right hand corner, we have a login and a register link from the authentication scaffolding. Now, before we can test out the register and login pages, we have one more thing we need to do. In Laravel Forge, we need to have our authentication tables migrated to create the database tables that we need for these processes. So we'll hop back into Forge and we'll go ahead and click Deploy Now. Now, you might be wondering what is different from the last time we clicked Deploy Now to this time, and the answer is that we have our database connected. Since our database is connected, Forge was able to run the PHP artisan migrate command, which included installing our tables. So now we should be able to go into our application and create an account. So let's hop over into there and we'll select register and create an account. And we are in. Because we were able to register an account, we can confirm that the connection between our application and the MySQL database was a success. And that is all we need to do. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching the video today. If you enjoyed what you saw, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like updates for future videos.